My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasangran, Guru Piran Nyo, fellow Nyanis. Today I'm going to complete the final part of Swamiji's teachings on effort, the 12th principle. And it brings everything together in the context of why effort is really important in everything that we do. You know, as an individual, as a family person, you know, as a son or daughter, as a spouse or a partner, as a parent, you know, as a someone who's in a university as a student, you know, as a professional, you know, as a community worker, and also in, you know, other social organizations. If we want to thrive in all dimensions, we need to put in a lot of effort with ourselves first. We have to, you know, be strong in our willpower, strong in our mind, strong in the pursuit of truth and the search for knowledge, not to take things for granted, not to be fearful for anything. After all, we've been blessed with the Creator's DNA. If we realize that, we don't need anything else. So with that, I want to then move to Swamiji's teachings on, he talks in the book, Swamiji speaks about the spiritual values, the self, and all those things. But he is one very pragmatic person that he comes down to our day-to-day activities. You see, it's great to be searching for spiritual enlightenment, peace, and everything else. But in our we all have to live our lives, right? We have roles and responsibilities. We all cannot sit down for 24 hours and meditate, or, you know, spend considerable time meditating, hopefully that the spirit will descend upon us, right? And this is what most people think. But actually, Swamiji flips it around. He says that when you become aware of yourself in that short moment of self-reflection, self-introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, once you know who you are, what you're made of, then it should manifest in every facet of our lives. And you should be able to experience it not just in that meditative moment, but also in every moment of our lives. And one who understands this, they will see that a key sign of that enlightenment is that everything that you do really blooms, even during the most challenging moment, even the most difficult moments. I remember when my home was flooded, you know, most people were very upset and so on. For a short moment, I had a sense of kind of joy and happiness that though the house was flooded, I had a chance to experience what flood was. I've seen it in TV, I've heard about it, but I've never experienced floods. But when I experienced flood, I say, hey, this is an interesting experience. Of course, the house was impacted, there were costs and so on, but you know, the home was flooded and I had a first-hand experience. That's what I mean by first-hand experience. Not just the good things, but also challenges in life. In the same moment, you know, quite interestingly, that I've seen in TV and read reports of COVID and heard a lot of people have experienced. And though when I got tested, you know, everybody was, you know, was sniffling and so on, I was okay. And when we tested, everybody, you know, my wife was tested positive. I was then realized, okay, I better test. I tested positive, although I didn't have the sniffles. But then here, there was a kind of a nice joy in me that, hey, I also get a chance to experience what this COVID bug is, right? At least I can say that in my generation or I have experienced what being infected by COVID is. and how, the body reacts to it. So, so it gave me a lot of time to reflect back on this, although nobody wants to be infected, but after you get infected, you then the body goes through change and say, this is something that I've never experienced before, different from different cold and other things. And you see how, and you keep your mind healthy, when you keep it in a very positive light, you see that slowly the experience, what was a scar or challenge, one can see, hey, the body is experiencing, the mind is still steady, though the body is painful and there's a lot of sniffling and complaining, but the mind is still steady. So you can see that you are not the body. Actually, you are something far greater, transcendental to the body. So what the COVID taught me was that though the body goes through all these changes, sometimes the body, the pain of the body, you get, a lot of aches and pains, and you can't sleep and all those things. But the mind is really steady. You say, okay, this too will change and transform, and you can experience, you feel that changes that are taking place, and that's in itself as a good learning experience. So in that sense, but that requires a fair bit of effort to know who you are, what your true self is, you see, and what I call the spiritual compass, right? So in this context, Swamiji brings it down to the level of our day-to-day life. So he talks about why this is really important. He talks about sustainable life. He talks about the different roles that many of us will have to play. And in the different roles, how do we do it in a divine way? This Mahan is a Mahan that doesn't say that you should give up desires or you should not have aspirations like what many others say. Many people say, oh, you don't, to attain enlightenment, you have to give up all your desires. This Mahan doesn't say that. This Mahan says that you have to divinize all your desires, aspirations, and so on. If you did that, then everything that we live in this life is worth living and experiencing and attaining that enlightenment. It's not a search for enlightenment. You are that enlightened, unchangeable, immortal, that is walking through this journey of life. And this is what Swamiji then goes on to coming down to what are the things that we need to do in this life? What are roles that we play? And here it's quite interesting. He actually articulates the type of roles that are so important for humanity. As a species, this is really important. And I'll tell you why today this is really critical, because it impacts all of us in our lives, right? He talks about, as Homo sapiens, as human beings, we are dependent on things. And he says that, this effort of attaining an enlightened life also means that an effort to ensure that humanity is able to sustain itself, through ensuring harmonious living, ensuring adequate food, adequate resources. All this requires effort. All this requires wisdom, knowledge. All this requires, a fair bit of emotional intelligence, a fair bit of spiritual intelligence, and a fair bit of social intelligence. All this will not be possible without a deep introspective mind. And here he speaks about producer of goods and services. Swamiji emphasizes a lot on agriculture. I must tell you that, a lot of my own work today is about sustainable food and, planetary health, and the health of the planet and the health of the people. And to ensure that our health is really good, we need to ensure that the planet is also healthy. If you see today, we have, COVID. We had so many zoonotic diseases. Much of those zoonotic diseases can be traced back to our human activities on how we produce goods and services, right? A lot of our, jungles are being wiped out because we are We want to expand our plantations. We want homes. So we start encroaching into other animals' habitat. And many of them have viruses that are endemic in them, doesn't impact them. But when we come into contact, and many of those viruses jump into us, which we don't have immunity. So if you see the SARS virus, if you see the COVID virus, all this were because of, global warming, because of, our encroachment to other natural habitat that is now ultimately impacting us. So Somji talks about very important as part of an enlightened community, we need to ensure that our goods and services for sustaining our humanity, agriculture, food, medical services, education, requires a fair bit of effort. People, communities, and countries that do not put in effort to ensure sustainable goods and services, production of goods and services, will remain poor. If you look at many poor countries, they are unable, even though they have a lot of natural resources, they are unable to produce goods and services, provide food for their people, healthcare, and so on. So this is also part of a spiritual journey. And Mahan, if you read the book carefully, speaks about agriculture. He speaks about the green revolution. We talk about the green revolution now, we talk about eco-friendly things. Mahan spoke about this in 1930s and 1940s, where he saw the population growth was significantly increasing, but the countries are unable to meet the food needs. So we see that part of the sustainability is about having the clarity in thought of not just having a spiritual mindset, a mindset that is universal in meeting the needs of people. And he emphasizes a lot on the type of professions. He doesn't say, because he's a Mahan, he says, okay, no, all the other jobs are not important. He says, no, be a Mahan, while you're producing goods and services, right? Be a Mahan in other job professions. He talks about administrators, people who are entrusted to look after the assets of the country and the community. He says that even them, they should be enlightened. If we don't enlighten them, there's a tendency for them to misuse or misappropriate or, don't use that assets properly. And sometimes they take it for themselves. And we see in some countries, this is happening where the country may be rich, but the people are poor because sometimes the administrators do not manage the resources very well. So again, retain the sustainable life, we need to put in effort to ensure not only food production, goods and services are there. We also have good administrators. We have to nurture ourselves as administering ourselves, our children, our families. Something very interesting that we see that we are all, I like to say that we are all CEOs of ourselves, our families, and our community. CEOs means Chief Enlightenment Officer. In corporate sector, we have Chief Executive Officer. I always say that Chief Enlightenment Officer, if we are not enlightened, we have no executive power over ourselves or anything else. So in this context, Swamiji speaks about it is very important for us to put in the effort to nurture good leaders. Not only leaders, we ourselves becoming good leaders, but good leaders in our home, good leaders in the community, and so on. That means teaching them good values. What are the good values? The spiritual values that gives us the 10 capital, from spiritual capital, emotional capital, and so on. So here somebody speaks about that effort is very important. Not everybody, may be a leader, but everybody has the potential to become a leader, right? The other one is also, he speaks about advisors. A society needs advisors, medical, scientists, research workers, teachers, and so on. All of us can play a key role. If we are enlightened, if we are CEOs, we would have learned how our journey is, and we would have acquired that wisdom, knowledge to provide advice to our own family, maybe our neighborhood, our communities, and if possible, all the way right up to the leadership of the country. So again, all of us have that potential to become advisors, but that requires effort. One of the capitals you'll see that I spoke about in the 10 capitals is that if we had the spiritual capital, the intellectual capital, all those capital, one of the capital is leadership capital, right? Harnessing our leadership qualities. And this is really important because it's not only to lead ourselves and our family, but lead society and communities. So people like Mahan and all stepped out of their boundaries to lead, where areas that people had this knowledge but did not share it widely. He found ways to be able to share this knowledge to everyone so that everybody gets access to this meditational method, the way of life, irrespective of race, religion, gender, social status. So we see that these qualities that Mahan spoke about, all of us, can harness that. And the last one is he speaks about the role of gurus. Here, teachers, educators, yoga teachers, spiritual gurus, that play a key role in society. I want to spend some time on spiritual gurus because there are gurus that teach us on contemporary knowledge. That means knowledge of the changing world. We learn this from schools, but we also have teachers that teach us about ourselves, the spirit, God, how the universe came about. So this eternal knowledge. So we have a role to learn from the best teachers, to learn from teachers, to acquire this knowledge and become teachers ourselves. Because some points, we see that our children, we become the first gurus for our children and the people that we interact with. And if we are able to learn from our gurus and our teachers and acquire that knowledge, we then are able to pass this on to the next generation. So here Swamiji talks about in all this, producers of goods and services, administrators, advisors, gurus, to achieve its pinnacle, to achieve its highest level, there's a fair bit of effort that is needed. Without effort, we would not have good producers of goods and services, administrators, advisors, and gurus. I take this from a more individual perspective, right? Spiritual is one thing. We all produce goods and services. When we go to work, we are actually providing a service to our employer. And in return, we get a salary, right? If we are unable to provide the best service, we see that our career progression may not be as rapid as possible. Similarly, as business people and so on. So at the individual level, we see that we encompass all the 4 roles in our lives. And to achieve as a professor, I have to make sure that I work really hard to teach well, do research. That requires a fair bit of effort, right? A 9-to-5 job would not work. I've got to work long hours to do many things, right? In that same way, other professions are the same. The same thing as administrators. There's so many things happening. I need to administer all my roles really well. As a student, as a teacher, as a professor, managing my students, looking after center, looking after family. So all this requires a fair bit of time management and so on, right? So again, there's an administrator in me that I've got to put in an effort to be the best. The same thing as advisors, you advise your family, your children, your community, and as gurus, we are all also gurus. So we see that in all these roles that we play, we have to put in effort, and without the effort, we will not excel in what we do. So here is a chart that shows that all of us have a footprint called reach, how much impact that we have in our lives, and how much richness, the quality of our lives. I really like this chart because I really use it in every facet of my work. So we see that some people's reach, that means the amount of impact that they have, is very low. Sometimes it's so low that they have very negligible impact in the lives of their own children, right? Sometimes when I speak to the children, they say, oh, my parents, they have no use to us. They don't do anything for us. So there are circumstances where parents do not play a key role in the children's life, far less anybody else's life, right? So we see in some cases where, among husband and wife, they don't have that reach among themselves. They don't reach out, right? So again, part of the spiritual journey is to build that strong reach, the impact that our life have, and then the quality of our lives. Not how long we live, but the quality that we live. So in this is what guides a lot of the work that I do. So let's come back to where the challenges are, and then how do we find the solutions? Producers, we see that we are unable to meet the needs of people. Sometimes we are unable to, when we don't do our job very well, we are unable to meet our own needs. We see this, in circumstances during most challenging periods, many people are laid off because their skill sets are not needed. And we see that many of them are unable to, pay for, the rental, get food, so on, because of circumstances. So they're unable to meet their own way of life, far less that of others. The other aspect is that we see that sometimes administrators don't manage their resources really well. And we see that, in many, countries and places, we see that the administrators, there's a lot of rent-seeking behavior, corruption, causes a lot of social instability. So these are extreme cases. The same thing with advisors, give very poor advice, which we are seeing today in our newspapers, a lot of things that are coming up because because of poor administration, poor advice. And similarly, teachers that are very money-minded, very superficial, do not deepen the knowledge of people. So we see this in our day-to-day life. So what does Mahan say? And we have to be very conscious that spirituality is one thing, but we've got to look at our own lives to see how strong our reach and our richness in impacting lives. And this is where I think the spiritual compass is so important, which we covered. The search for truth using scientific and rational ways of looking at things, looking at religious teachings and the values that religion teaches us, and similarly spiritual pursuit. And if we have that spiritual compass that is centered, focused on the self, the I, everything starts and ends with us. All goodness starts, the epicenter of all goodness starts and ends with us. And similarly, all epicenter of negativity starts and ends with us, right? If we have that spiritual compass that guides us, we see that, a producer is not only meeting the needs of oneself, but the needs of all in a very sustainable way. Whoever that they comes to them, they're able to meet their needs. Similarly, we see that, a good administrator, a producer will meet all the needs. An administrator, their focus is on quality of life, quality of life, improve, quality of life and improve for the people, right? So improving the quality of life of people, not only for themselves, for the others. How do we manage our assets? How do I manage the resources really well? How do we save, and use the resources in the best possible way so that it continues to the next generation? So we see in many parts of Asia, parents invest into children's education so that children can, but that's not true in many societies. right? Where children are left alone, and we see the ramification of that. We also see that in countries that are well managed and communities that are well managed, they have good advisors, well thought advisors, and good decisions are taken. Leaders are given good advice, and leaders take good decisions. Not just the leaders, but the advisors give good advice to the people too, and the people take that advice. For example, if you go to many Scandinavian countries, you see that the decisions taken by many of those developed countries, the leaders, they're very conscientious of how resources are put in place. You go there, cleanliness, the river is clean, people don't throw garbage everywhere. So we see that, not just producing goods, but also managing them very well, but also advising people. So it's inculcated this good values of cleanliness, you know, no corruption, managing the assets very well, investing into the right things. And we see that, you know, we learn to live in a very spiritual way. And so, and similarly, we see that gurus, that harness this spiritual compass, they're not interested in their own self-development. Gurus are actually coaches, mentors, guides. That's it, right? So they are not to be kind of lauded over. They are just a guide like anybody else. So the guru's role is to learn to live a spiritual and divine life, teaching people learn to live a spiritual and divine life. They can only give you instructions and tell you this is how it worked for them, and this is what you can try out, right? And if it works for you, great. Otherwise, try something else, right? Mahan himself tells very clearly, don't put, pray to me, all this. He says, no, most important thing is try to follow the teachings and the meditation methods and discover it yourself. So again, the guru's role is essentially to, teach and guide, to become a mentor, and to show people, these are things that worked for them. So next is that I just want to show you some examples that, a lot of work I do, this kind of mindset. We do a lot of work with agriculture and farmers, and we show that, many farmers struggle. But when they take a spiritual outlook, you see that the farmers learn new things. When they're open to new knowledge, as I said to you, that the creativity, that knowledge, the 10 capitals, you see that farmers become more and more productive, right? And this is part of spirituality. It's not just they become financially better, but they also can produce goods and services for the broader market. And this is what we see. They use the best technology, they learn, there's continuous learning, they use the best eco-friendly fertilizers and better techniques to harness their plantations. But that requires effort. That requires discovering that creativity, the innovation in oneself. It doesn't come, there is no process of photosynthesis that makes this happen. It requires a fair bit of effort. I want to come back to now the challenges that we have, right? The world is in the brink of World War III, and we see that all we need is one trigger. And we see that, the whole of Europe could be in full-fledged war that could pull the entire global community into a war. We've had two wars that we, at that time, thank God, we did not have weapons of mass destruction. Should, something like that happen today, I think humanity's existence will be threatened. And this is where I think all of us need to put in the effort to ensure that, our societies are more rational, and become more and more thoughtful on the existence of humanity and the future of humanity. So this is where I think, again, that spiritual mindset is very important, inculcating that. And I think if we did that really well, and this requires a fair bit of effort, all of us have to play a key role, in being positive, in being, though there are challenges, not to stoke, differences, but take a more universal outlook in life, in terms of, not seeing the separation, but essentially to see the oneness. Though our colors may be different, our races may be different, but when you go past the surface of the skin, we all are the same. So through this spiritual pursuit, we see that, we need to, the only way to attain that universal peace is through the spiritual lens, and I think this requires a fair bit of effort. If we don't put in the effort to harness world peace, I worry for humanity. The existence of humanity could be, be questioned, actually. More at the individual level, I think this is something that most people are experiencing today: stress. And you see that the reach is relatively low, and the richness, and many people I've heard many from our own disciples and others, many of them are highly stressed because of COVID, because of job losses, incomes are reducing, cost of living has gone up. How do we overcome this, right? These are challenges of the modern world. And this is where we see that the meditation, the introspection, contemplation, reflection gives us a sense of calmness, coolness. May not solve the problem, but it'll give us a sense of clarity on how do we reduce our cost of living, how do we try new ventures, how do we do things differently to elevate some of the challenges that we have. If we are stressed, things will magnify even further. And this is where we see that the spiritual pursuit requires a fair bit of effort. And if we are able to discover who we are, and if we are able to attain that universal peace, we can achieve anything we want. And this is what the pursuit is. Without peace, we cannot achieve our full potential or full infinite possibilities, right? We would not have landed man on the moon or, explored the stars, without that creativity and innovation. And I think this is at the individual level. When the human mind is at peace, it discovers its full infinite potential. And in that discovery, you see that life actually is really an awesome journey. So with that, to summarize, the effort is really important in everything that we do, but it starts with discovering who we are. It could be challenging for many people who are just starting on this journey, particularly those who are starting to meditate. But the best way to master meditation is to meditate. I always tell people, sometimes for writers, they say, what is the best way to be a good writer? Is to write, right? And the same way in everything that we do, if you want to master meditation, we've got to put in that effort. If we want to master everything in our lives, learn to discover the full potential in ourselves. Thank you. Sandosham.